2006, 2007, you moved to Washington.
Yeah.
He's working for Microsoft at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And how'd you like Washington? Now, Washington's more integrated.
Yeah, I
Washington,
loved it.
we had like a neighbor from Iran. We had a neighbor from Pakistan. We had, India. We had
I absolutely
French people.
Oh, I loved it. It was everything.
Culturally, it's very integrated and diverse.
Yes, I loved it so much.
Yeah.
And we did move there for a couple years when I was baptized in Washington, Redmond, actually. My dad worked for Microsoft for a little bit when we were there, and then we moved back to Utah in the same house. So I've lived there for a little bit, and I loved it. Still, I mean, obviously moving into senior year, it was still a little bit hard to find some friends, but I found a ward there.
But your dad wasn't in the church at the time.
No, he wasn't in the church.
Wow. So
I went to church on my own.
And what ward, what stake, do you remember?
Redmond.
Like what city? You were in Redmond.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't remember the ward exactly, but it was Redmond.
Okay.
Yeah. So
church is kind of strong in Redmond.
Yeah, it was. And I loved it because it was like people were not, I could tell that they weren't, they were different than the people in Utah. They've seen diversity.
Yeah.
They didn't treat me differently. In fact, when I would talk
Even though it's probably mostly white again, right?
Yeah, it was mostly white again.
Yeah.
There were a couple brown people there. Like I had a friend, her name was Siggy. She was Ethiopian and she was in my ward.
Whoa.
Yeah. and her parents weren't members, but she would go. And so we would kind of so I had her.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. Or, okay, sorry, she was in my stake, not in my ward. But yeah.
I'll take it.
So yeah, for sure. So yeah, so I just felt like, it was great. People were, like, I was being asked on dates by kids, and obviously are white because they're,
still white.
There's not,
Redmond's still very white. But
at least it was genuine. It wasn't because, like, I'm curious, or it was like, no, like, I like you, and so, like, that was kind of like, so I did, school was great. I did really well in the ward. I loved it. I thrived.
For maybe the first time.
Yeah, the first time. Yeah, I was like, these are my people. That's kind of what I was thinking. And then my dad decides to move. He gets a job in Utah.
Oh, no.
And he decides to move.
You're like, I'm not moving.
And so I'm like, I'm not moving. So I found a friend, and they let me stay with them for the rest of my senior year.
That's so nice.
Yeah, and he was a stake president.
Richardson.
Oh, did I say the name?
No, I did.
Okay.
I'm guessing. Because I knew the stake president in Redmond when I was there. You didn't say it. Okay. I did it. You don't have to confirm it.
Okay.
I know he had a huge family.
Yeah.
Smart guy. Okay. Yeah. You don't have to confirm or deny anything I said. So yeah, I knew you were like you were probably in my brother's ward.
I probably was. Yeah, probably. Hey.
Anyway, okay.
So I lived with them.
Fun. That's so nice.
I loved them, actually. I really enjoyed it.
Great humans.
I loved it. But the one thing I wasn't used to was like we woke up at like 5 a.m. and we had like preach my gospel.
Yeah, they're intense.
In the morning. Yeah. And then we had seminary at 6. So.
Yeah, but for a Mormon upbringing, it doesn't get much better than that.
Yeah, but at the same time, I also loved it. I was like, okay, like I'm going to up my gospel game, I was like, okay, I could do this. And so, yeah, so we would do that, go morning seminary, and then I would go to school, and like I was on the leadership team, like I was in the Glee Club, like, I had friends who were Jewish, friends who were Muslim, like it was so great. I loved it. I loved that diversity, and it was for the first time that I felt like, okay, I belong here, like, yes, I'm different, but it's like we're all different, and we all, I loved it.
Yeah. Yeah. And what's got to be confusing, and again, I don't want to project onto your experience, but like, there's going to be hard things about living in Utah, period.
Yeah, for sure.
And there's going to be hard things about living in Utah as a person of color.
Yeah.
But there's hard things about living lots of places.
Yeah,
and there's hard places about being a person of color everywhere.
Yeah.
So we might... I have a dual process going on in my mind about, wow, there are a lot of things that were hard about your upbringing in Utah, and it could have been a lot worse in a lot of other places.
For sure.
Right?
Yeah.
And yes, there were problems, and your dad, and like church-related things where you weren't always comfortable and the curse of Cain or whatever.
Yeah.
And what freaking family would take you in your senior year and treat you with so much love?
Yeah, I loved it.
And when your dad had to go, like a Mormon family would do that, and a Mormon family did that. And so like, it's never this unambiguous bad. It's always this complex combination of good and bad.
Yeah, I love them. Like I love the siblings. Like I just loved the kids. And
but even your family's Mormon experience up through high school, you can't say it was this nightmare. It was good and bad. It was a mix.
Yeah, it was a mix. Like, and I'm grateful again that I lived with my family, because my mom was very much like, if there was something wrong, she would tell people off. Mm-hmm. So I think I was grateful living with her and having them as parents, because even though I was dealing with all this crap going around, they would always ground me, and they would be like, if someone said something like, Marlena, that's not true. Like, we are great. My mom would be like, no, this is. So even though I had those like times in church, my mom would be like, no, we are amazing. Like, we're of great worth. We are this and this and this. So she always would ground me.
All right. So you found your home, and then you had to apply to college.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Oh. So yeah, I applied to college. The only school I applied to was BYU.
Well, there is the University of Washington. There is Washington State.
Was not interested.
Western Washington. There's Eastern Washington, Central Washington.
Oh, definitely not. I was only going to BYU. That's the only school I applied to.
Oh, that put you back in Provo.
Yeah, it did. But then, like living with the Richards. Oh, why am I saying?
I blew it, but it doesn't. I did it.
That's fine.
You blame it on me if you get in trouble.
But living with them, it was like, okay, yeah, because
that's what you do in the gospel.
Yeah, was one of my friends, and she was gonna go to BYU, so like, we can go together, and so like, it was good.
They had a daughter your age.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
They're so, and that's how it started. She asked them, and so we would hang out, and we were on the Glee Club, and she's an amazing singer, and so we applied to BYU, and I remember because I didn't get the best SAT scores, and I think they knew that. And I just remember, and I'm not going to say who said things, but people just being like, oh, of course you're going to get in BYU because you're black, So it was almost like.
What's that like? Someone could say, well, BYU is hard to get into, so you'd be happy about that.
Yeah, I know, but you're going to get in but it's like, okay, whatever, if there is some truth to the mission, whatever. But when you say that to somebody, it makes them feel like, okay, so I'm not smart enough to get in. Mm-hmm. It's because I'm a token black kid, and so that's why I'm getting in. Mm-hmm. And when a lot of people when they say that to you, it makes you feel like, oh, I'm not smart enough. I'm not good enough.
Yeah.
And that happened a lot. Mm. And
it's like you're going to get in.
Yeah.
But that doesn't feel good.
No. Yeah. And I remember writing this essay, and I had and I told my whole story, and it was hard stuff there, and I got in. But still, there's a part of me that's like, well, did I get in because I was black, or did I get in because I was smart enough?
And it's another thing. Then you have to deal with that quote imposter syndrome of feeling like you don't belong, and you've been feeling that way your whole life, except for the year in Seattle. And okay,
so and I'm glad I got in because it's the only school I applied to.
Yeah, thank goodness.
And I wanted to go to BYU because my dad did, and at that time we were getting along, and I was starting to really get that, me and my dad are really similar. Like, I really was realizing, like, I always knew he was a good person, because even whenever I would go over there every weekend, like, I enjoyed it, but I think deep down I still like had these feelings because he left the church, and the divorce happened. But I went to BYU. Should I go there now?
Yeah, if you want, unless there's something important about your story. No. When did your patriarchal blessing happen?
Oh, when I was 14.
Okay, we missed that. Do you want to talk about that?
Sure.
Really quick?
Well, you know what? Actually, it will.
Come back to it.
It will come back.
Okay.
It will, when we talk in college, it will come. Okay. The story will come up. Okay. So I went to got to BYU.
Did you go to the dorms?
I lived in where's the
Helaman Heritage, Deseret Towers, any of that? No.
Not. Is it Heritage? Well, the one that was like families used to live in it, and then they converted it to single. I can't remember what it's called. Okay. But I lived in that one.
Wymount?
Oh, Wymount. Yes, yeah. Wymount.
Your parents, didn't you say your parents lived in Wymount?
Uh-huh.
Okay.
Well, so my first.
Thanks, Cody.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, I lived at Wymount, and it was interesting. Like I enjoyed my college experience, but I remember I had my roommates. One was from forgive me if I get this wrong if you watch this, but I think she's from New Jersey. My other roommate was from California, and like it was cool. Like my roommates were used to seeing, like my other roommate was Latina, so she it was nice to be around, other brown people.
Well, diversity.
Yeah, diversity. But I remember she was calling. Oh man, yeah, she was calling her missionary on the phone.
Ooh.
He was on the mission.
Oh wait, that's no good.
Yeah, me being so Molly, we reported her. There's so many things that, my experience at BYU. Yeah, so yeah, I went to BYU and it was pretty good for the most part.
So you're saying that you were trying to be a Molly Mormon good girl?
Oh yeah.
And the honor code made it so you were always what?
I always followed the rules. I didn't.
You did.
Yeah, I always. Yeah.
But you were saying it makes you want to report other people, or
I did. We told the bishop because she was calling her missionary,
and looking back now,
I wish I hadn't done that.
But at the time, that's what you do. You sign up for that.
Yeah,
you made a commitment.
Yeah, for sure.
So you told your bishop that your roommate was talking to her missionary.
Yeah, on the phone. And I just couldn't I didn't even understand that people did that. Because I was so
Who would break the rules?
Yeah, exactly. I didn't know people broke rules because I didn't break the rules. I didn't know. I thought everyone at BYU was following the rules.
Yeah.
Because I was always, and so yeah. So yeah, I went to BYU, and it was great though because I was in the art department. So I feel like my experience might have been different had I had a different major, because a lot of my teachers are more liberal. They were, more understanding. They were just really cool. Like a lot of the people in that had beards. They had beard cards, but I think they got them somehow. Mm-hmm. So I'm grateful that I was in that major. Yeah. So it made life easier.
Is that me. The HVAC, the Harris Fine Arts Center? That's where you hung out?
Yep, that's where I hung out. And then I also worked in the multicultural student services. So I was around all the brown people at BYU. And
now, what's that like to have this little? Because when I was at BYU, it's if you're a person of color, you're either an athlete, basketball player or football player or track person, or you're from Africa because you are an international student.
Yeah.
There's pretty much no people of color, or you're Polynesian, you're Tonga or Samoa.
Yeah.
And there were very few Latinos that I ever ran into. Mm-hmm. So was it kind of like...
It was more, I think at that time it was a lot more, but I hung out with everyone because I worked in the multicultural student services and there's a thing called SOAR that they did.
What is that?
It's basically for... I mean, it was almost like people would say it was like EFY for brown kids, but it wasn't. It was for first generation college students, but we all mostly happened to be brown. Mm-hmm. And so it was kind of
and this is just a little social club or what?
It was it's like EFY. It was like EFY in that, except it was like ACT prep to get into BYU. Does that make sense? They would create these programs, and for first generation college students, people who, would be that, to have ACT prep, and then most people who went to SOAR would go to BYU, and they're all brown, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Usually.
Yeah.
I mean, there were some white kids there too, but...
And then you were part of SOAR as
I was a SOAR counselor. So I wasn't a part of the, going to that, but I was a SOAR counselor
Meaning you would counsel young kids?
Yeah, we were EFY counselors, but SOAR counselors. So we were,
okay.
Yeah.
That's kind of cool, right?
Yeah.
Was it at the time, did you feel like you were...
I loved it.
You're helping young kids of color
for sure.
do what they need to do to get into BYU, which is a great school.
For sure. And I was a part of all, they had the luau, the powwow, everything. I was a part of all of that.
And so were your friends mostly people of color at BYU, or was it just everything? Was it?
Yeah, yes. But also I was really friends with everybody. Cause I was very social.
So did you feel like you belonged at BYU?
Yeah, I did.
That's nice.
Yeah, I did.
Yay.
Yeah, I did. And, I think, I when I moved to Washington, that's when I got out of my shyness, and so I was very I'm a very social person. A lot of people knew me. Yeah.
So So you kind of got out of your depression.
Yeah. Yeah.
Seattle took you out of your depression.
Yes, Seattle took me out of my depression.
And BYU didn't throw you back in.
No.
So you had a good experience in Provo.
I did. I mean, obviously there were some things here and there, but for the most part, yeah. You know, like I remember like if someone was like rude to me or whatever, or, you know, even at the time when I had a little bit more confidence that they would walk on the other side of the road, I'd play this game where I would wave to people, and if they would say hi to me, then like, great. And if they didn't, then I'll basically in my mind say, whatever, I'll see you in heaven. So I was very positive, like just like not really, you know.
So you would see people cross the street when they saw you coming on the sidewalk.
Yeah. And at the same time, I couldn't tell if it was just because they had a hard day and they didn't want to talk to anybody, but yeah, it's happened. And so I would just kind of like try to make sense of it, you know, so I could like serve, you know, like, you know, like even at BYU.
I've never once thought about that.
Yeah.
If anything, I've been the one to change the street if I saw someone who made me feel uncomfortable.
Right.
So.
And like, yeah, so and maybe that's what happened, but I just always am like, oh, wait, is it because of this or that? And they probably didn't care or whatever, or weren't even.
Or they were.
Yeah, or they were. Who knows?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, and that was, my experience.
So talk about dating. Talk about dating at BYU.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Yeah. Dating.
What? Spell it out.
So dating was interesting because most people are, you know, white. Obviously.
So BYU's like 90% white? 98?
Yeah. I don't even know really. There's a lot of white people. Like, okay. Yeah. Yeah. So basically it was funny. Like I remember being wards and people were like, oh, I should set you up with this guy. And in my mind I'm like, are they black? Of course they're black.
Oh.
You know? And I probably even happened to know them, and they were probably like a brother to me. But it was like people were constantly trying to set me up with someone who was also black.
It's like it was like basketball. It's like, oh, this person's a person of color. Yes. You need to date them.
Yeah, and not even knowing if we would jive personally.
Yeah, like are they into art? Are they, you know, are they it's just like again, color connections.
Yes. And most of the people that I would date they either served a mission in Africa or, you know, like, and at the time I was like, oh, okay, whatever. But those were usually people that I would go on dates with or dated.
And what does that feel like? What goes to your mind, or what's wrong with that?
I mean, it was frustrating, but at the same time, it was nice because they at least were around they at least were exposed to that. And it was in a way nice at the same time, but also frustrating, if that makes sense. That it was like it took some people to go on a mission to experience like, oh, these people are just like me. Like, we're not even that different. And then come back to be like, oh, like, okay, I could date you now kind of thing. Like now I recognize that I could, you know, and I'm not saying everybody was like this, but it just my experience with the people that I dated, that was what happened. And I even remember like when I was dating this one kid who started a mission in Africa, and all the African girls were upset at me because I took their guy. Because there wasn't that many like options for dating, and when there were some men who were interested in, you know,
other African BYU students,
other African BYU students, and here I was African American, and he's dating me, and I got a lot of them were upset at me for doing so. And and I actually lived with some girls, and there was one girl who was like, I don't like you, you know, like it was like I couldn't even fit in with them because I wasn't African, you know, I was African American. Anyway, so dating was difficult. I even remember saying someone told me that they couldn't date me because I was black.
You did have that happen?
Yeah, I did.
Did they say like where their
just
parents?
Just nonchalantly, just like you're really great, but I couldn't date you, you know, I couldn't date a black girl, you know. I'm like, oh, okay.
And I mean that comes from, if you look at the teachings of Brigham Young, where he basically, Brigham Young or Spencer B. Kimball, there's a long history of prohibiting multiracial kind of marriage, right, in Mormonism. And so whether or not that's the official church doctrine, it certainly is culturally an artifact for over a century. And so certainly that's going to influence some of the students.
Yes.
Yeah. So you were just flat out told that.
Yeah.
Sorry, I mean, can't marry you.
Exactly.
You're not my color.
Yeah, for sure. And then luckily, like as time went on, like, and that's more of my first couple years of BYU, but as time went on, I met genuine people that I, would date, and it wasn't because of those things. It was just because, we liked each other just because of who we were as people. So I did have, after some time, I had some more positive experiences where it wasn't based on color, It was just, yeah.
Okay. So, all right. Yeah. So dating.
Yeah, dating. Yeah, that was, yep.
So what happens next in your story?
Yeah, so what happens next? There's so many. I would like to talk about religion classes at BYU. I went through a lot of religion classes, and I remember whenever they talked about the curse of Cain or something that has to do with Black people, that would always come up.
It would come up.
It'd always come up.
Okay.
And I remember there was this one kid that was like, isn't it true that like God blesses people with riches? And so like because of that, and I'm kind of, it's not exactly what he said, but this is what he was getting at. It was like, because of that, like, and because of slavery and like Black people didn't have that, that they are less than, he was basically implying that because of the history that, that they were being punished because they weren't as righteous as white people. And whenever that would happen, I would always stand up and I would just, because I knew my scriptures, I knew my scriptures, and and the way that I understood them to make sense for me, I would always be like, my thoughts are not your thoughts, my ways are not your ways. Like I would say things, God looketh on the outward, appearance, he looketh at the heart. You know what I'm trying to say when I'm butchering it up. But those are things that I would do. And I always thrived. I actually was excited for that, to be the one person that would set the record straight, because the teacher wouldn't say anything or didn't know what to say. Mm-hmm. And so I would always say things like that. Or when they would say the darkening of the skin, or even when they would say that Mary was fair, even though they probably was meaning skin color, I related fairness. And when I would look at the old, dictionary, there was one idea that fair meant more about the physical, the personality of that person. Mm-hmm. And so that's how I saw Mary. And that's how I was able to relate to Mary. And that, when I would, quote that scripture that God looketh on the heart, that it's because she was married because she was a good woman, not because she was a beautiful, fair woman. It was because she was, a devout girl, and she was of great, she had great qualities as a person, personality. So that's kind of how I would, whenever that would happen, I would always, set the record straight. Mm-hmm. And so that's what I would do in my religion classes.
The word that comes to my mind is apologist. In other words, making excuses or finding some way to justify maybe what's unjustifiable. It sounds like the place you fit in the culture required you, and maybe your own desire to manage your cognitive dissonance drove you to be an apologist for things that other people should be explaining, not you.
Yeah, exactly. And also I was just trying to prove that that it's not what it is. Like people would say, no, this is what it is. Mary wasn't, it's because she was a good person. I would, So that's what I would do all the time, even in my ward. Mm-hmm. And I was always like best buds with my bishops, and I felt sometimes I was even used, and like, Marlena, can you have this talk and talk about your experiences? And I would, stand up there and I would,
And there's a thing in multicultural discussions about not having the minority have to be the spokesperson for their minority group.
Yes, for sure.
And it sounds like, but the weird thing is, in that context, again, it's almost like you're back where your parents were before they got divorced. Mm-hmm. You're back now sort of like making all the white people feel good, because you're basically saying the church isn't racist, and I have a good experience in Mormonism. Tell me if I'm right or wrong.
Well, not quite, actually. Okay. I actually made people somewhat uncomfortable, because I would say things like, I would basically be telling them that they're wrong for thinking that the blacks, and so actually a lot of the students were uncomfortable because they
had been taught the Brigham Young, Bruce R. McConkie stuff.
Yes,
the blacks were less valiant in the pre-existence, or things like that.
Yeah, ish. And I think some of them just the way that I was, I would say things like, I would just say some things that maybe not some people wouldn't be as comfortable about calling some people out. Sometimes I would, you know, for their treatment towards this person because this is what the gospel means.
But for people that didn't want to believe that the gospel was racist,
right?
Like there were people who were like, believe the gospel is racist.
Yeah.
You made those people feel uncomfortable. But for the other people that didn't want the gospel to seem racist, here a person of color is like saying, oh no, the gospel isn't racist.
Right. You're
and
racist.
I can see all these, you're racist.
That's what I was
But I can also see other white people in the room going, whew, I don't want to be part of a racist church. And if she's a person of color and she's defending the church, the church must not be racist.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm not in a racist church.
Yeah, I'm not in a racist church, but I may be racist. That's kind of like where I'm like, you're racist.
You're
the
racist,
gospel's not
the gospel. Not this church.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. And but you were probably feeling good at BYU being in that role or not.
I was like, I felt like I was being, like a missionary for the white Mormons. Teaching them how to, understand that
the gospel.
The gospel.
The true gospel.
The real gospel that didn't mean that the darkening the skin was actually physically darkening the skin. It was their spiritual, it was more about the spiritual.
Yeah, God was never racist. The
God
Book of Mormon is not racist.
No, God meant your who you were as a person, because he doesn't look on the outward appearance.
Right. He looks
that scripture,
on the end. Right. Yeah.
So
dark and loathsome meant spiritually dark and loathsome.
Yeah.
White and delightsome meant spiritually bright.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah. It didn't mean skin color. Yeah.
Interesting. Okay. So anything else about religion classes?
No, that's about it.
Okay.
I would say that's about it. Yep.
Okay. So it mentions your patriarchal blessing.
Yeah. Oh, yes. So I remember it was weird. Sometimes in religion classes, they'd be like, stand up if you're in the tribe of this, The
tribe of Ephraim, the tribe of Manasseh.
Yeah.
Are the two most common, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I was the tribe of Judah.
So for those who aren't Mormon, and we do have a lot of non-Mormon listeners, Mormons get what's called a patriarchal blessing. And because the world was so racist in the 19th century, there was this obsession about people's bloodlines, but then there was also this obsession around the tribe of Israel and the blood of David and, running through the veins of originally the early Jews, but then Native Americans were supposed to be descendants of the Jews. And so Native Americans were supposed to have the pure blood of Israel. And the Book of Mormon has this whole narrative about bloodlines, and some would say it's very racist, but anyway, Mormons and Christians became adopted into God's chosen people, and anyway, when we became teens or young adults, we'd get these patriarchal blessings where a patriarch, an older gentleman in our religion, would put his hands on our head, give us like a prophecy, almost like fortune telling about what your life's going to be like. And they would, as part of the patriarchal blessing, declare your lineage. And it sometimes it's been equated with a spiritual lineage, but other times it's confused with like a blood lineage. And so you're told what tribe of Israel you come from. And again, most white people would be told they're from Ephraim. Sometimes is it Latinos or others would be told Manasseh?
I'm not sure. I don't know.
But anyway, blood lineage. And so you get your patriarchal, or you're thinking about your patriarchal blessing. So take over.
Yeah, and so in my patriarchal blessing, it says that I am the royal lineage of Judah.
Judah.
Yeah.
So that's like.
Yeah.
That's rare. For me, only Jews get that.
Yeah.
And again, how would the patriarch know? Oftentimes they do an interview beforehand, find out what your racial lineage might be, and then all of a sudden, miraculously, that's the blessing. But I'm not sure what a person of color would normally get, like a person of African American descent.
Like I have a friend who's Black. Hers is Benjamin. My sister, Manasseh. Yeah.
But white people are pretty much always Ephraim.
Yeah, my mom and my dad, Ephraim.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, and so why are you getting a different tribe than your parents?
I don't know.
Because it's all like kind of science fiction, but Judah, what does that mean?
Well, it was interesting because when I stood up and I was the only one, he claps for me.
What? You get a clap.
I'm like, because of Christ,
Because Christ came out of the tribe of Judah.
Yeah.
Christ was a descendant
Yeah.
of one of the 12 sons
Yeah.
of Jacob
Yeah.
or Israel.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you get an applause. So
Yeah.
what, would that be awesome? You're getting applauded.
It was awesome, but weird, because at the same time, even though I had a lot of people telling me, well, you can't be from Judah. You're black. You know, like there was this idea, you're black. You can't be Judah. You were,
that makes no sense.
Like, even though technically everyone that was adopted in the tribe, they made sure that I knew that I was adopted into it, because you can't really, you're you're brown. You can't. You can't.
Yeah.
So that was my experience. And yeah, when it came to my tribe.
Yeah.
But I loved my practical blessing, though. I would study it and all that stuff. But
yeah,
that part, for some reason, it was like, yeah.
So did it make you feel Jewish or something? Like,
No, but I just thought it was interesting, though, that people just wanted to make sure that I was adopted into that, because it was.
It's not legitimate.
Yeah.
Judah. It's
there's
adopted.
no way that a black person could,
Again, weirdness.
Yeah.
And to have some religion teacher applauding you for something that I guess you had no control over, but
yeah, it was interesting, because I just didn't think of it as something that was special,
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
Again, is God a respecter of persons or not?
Yeah.
Looks on the inside, not the outside. But then,
right.
All right, interesting.
Yeah.
So, all right. So, anything else you talk about struggles at BYU? Is that stuff you've already talked about? Or?
Yeah. So so that all happened, and then what all changed is I was invited with actually my best friend and some other graduate students who were black to go on the civil rights trip. And that changed everything for me.
Okay, talk about that.
Because when I grew up in Utah, history, they don't really teach you really what happens with history, especially black history. You don't really know what happens. When you even learned about the Native Americans, what do they tell you? Oh yeah, they sit down and had dinner,
Thanksgiving.
Yeah, Thanksgiving, and everything was happy. No,
Columbus Day is a celebration.
There was killing. And so
genocide, right?
Yeah, it was crazy. So I learned where all of this came from. I learned more about who I was, why people were treating me the way that was treating me, what Malcolm X I learned all this stuff, and it was like I changed. Like,
where were you? Where did you go on this trip?
We went to Alabama. We went to Martin Luther King's house.
So Birmingham,
all of it. Everything. And we
with
studied.
The church burnings.
Yeah, and we watched before we went on the trip. And this was cool. Like they found certain students. They selected me and my friend, these other, I would say, some progressive people, and they selected us to have this experience because we, it's it was really cool. Anyway, so we studied before we went, and we watched all these things about the march and what happened in the jail, and just all the real stuff, so the dirty stuff.
Birmingham,
all
Selma,
of it. Selma, yes, all of it.
And did you watch what's the PBS documentary on the civil rights?
Yes.
What's that called?
I don't remember what it's called.
Eyes on the Prize.
Yes, we watched Eyes on the Prize,
That's
and
so
we
good.
watched.
That's so good.
I learned about the Freedom Riders,
and
all of that, and it just it was like my eyes were being opened.
Isn't that weird to learn that when you're a young adult?
Yeah, and the thing is, my parents, they knew this stuff, but it wasn't. I don't think they didn't realize that I wasn't. They did teach me some things, but you know what I mean. It's not like they. Yeah. So, anyway, I learned all these things, and I just realized what was going on, and I was recognizing that my BYU experience wasn't as amazing as I realized. Does that make sense?
Why? Well, why?
There was a lot of things that I was just letting go. I was just being okay. I was being the nice girl. I was just okay with people saying things or not realizing that deep down it hurt, but just kind of taking it. Does that make sense? Not standing up for myself, just kind of wanting to be the person that, even though I would stand up and say the gospel, but it was in the scriptures. I had that. I could do that because I was reading the scriptures, and they can't refute the scriptures, so I could do that for that. But when it came to everything that came with also, the priesthood ban and understanding, just understanding all of that, it's I shifted and changed. Me and my best friend, it was we stopped being so, we weren't so concerned with being so liked, and we realized like what was really going on, why people were being like, you sound different, or, you know, like what was coming from, or when people were like, what music do you like? Or, oh, where are you from? I'm from Provo. No, where are you from? Like, do you want me to say Africa? You know, like, I told you I was born in Provo.
Yeah, again,
but it's like
microaggressions.
Yes, but recognizing that before, I'd be like, oh, it wasn't that bad because it's not really racism. But then recognizing the damage of that and not realizing that that was hurting me deep down.
Yeah.
And that there was a part of me, even though I was standing up for, you know, certain things that were being said, there was deep down, I was trying to be white. Does that make sense? I was not accepting like my sibling, you know, the culture, black culture. You think about even other cultures. Rap, everything. It is bad. It's, bad. Black means bad.
Yeah.
You know, and that was when I first realized that deep down I was doing that to myself and other black people.
Is that internalized racism? Is that what that's called?
I'm not sure the term, but yeah. And I realized, oh, wow, I don't accept myself. And so that was the thing that it shifted in me and changed so much.
And you're how old when this happens?
I was like no, I was not 7. I was like 20. Oh my gosh. How old was I? 23? No, 22? 22?
Now that's got to be like mind blowing.
Yeah, it was. It was. And I got my mom, I understood my mom, you know, my mom was very much like, you know, very strong black woman, you know, and I didn't always get that because, like, you know, I was raised in Utah, and she was like the only example, which I love, but it was just, I didn't always get why, you know, where that was coming from. And I now was starting to get it, you know, and I was starting to understand, and yeah, it was interesting. And it changed so many things. I that was when I was like, oh, I kind of want to get out of here. You know, I started to realize like, oh, Utah's not always like this great place. I recognized like what it was doing to me, and I was trying so hard to fit in. And what I was trying to do was, my idea was to fit in was to be white like everyone else. But deep down, what that meant.
Yeah.
But it was like I never could. So, yeah.
So is that kind of a form of self-loathing or self-hatred?
Yeah.
Where you're trying to be what you're not and trying to not be what you are?
Yeah, I would say yeah, in a way. But I don't think I guarantee there's a lot of people who can black or not or even another race that's not white could probably relate to that in some way.
Cecil Shellman, who I think is sisters to Spencer Nugent, says, yes, it's internalized racism. I did this to myself as well. So Janet writes, Marlena, you're a beautiful lady. Thank you for sharing.
Thanks. It's scary.
We're having a lot of people writing really, really nice comments. You'll want to go back and read a lot of these comments. But listeners write with us. We have 126 live listeners. So that's a lot for a business day, middle of the day kind of thing. So.
I hope people forgive me for not knowing terms. But,
no, it's fine. So like you have this awakening, and believe it or not, I didn't have, and I had a different awakening.
Yeah.
But at BYU, I had this awakening where I learned about Martin Luther King Jr. and I learned about Malcolm X and I learned about the civil rights movement. And even for me, it was like, what country, where am I living where we do this to people and where we have these centuries of treating people? And even for me, it was just this like, oh my gosh, the world is. Yeah. I remember growing up, Malcolm X was that bad guy who was like a violent. Yeah. He was like a violent guy. And Martin Luther King, I was taught as a Mormon, Martin Luther King, well, he was a communist,
right?
You know, and he, J. Edgar Hoover in the FBI, like he was a bad, dishonest man. And so you looked on the civil rights movement with kind of like disdain and like they weren't heroes, right? And then you see Eyes on the Prize, or you get awakened, or you read the Malcolm X documentary, or all of a sudden it's like your whole world shifts. Yeah.
And like, luckily, like my parents we had Malcolm X books, and like that was still like my family. This is a side note. They owned one of the first African American bookstores in our house, so I had literature to look at a lot, you know. But I didn't always look at it. But I think just it was nice to be in a school setting where I was told that, not just being told that by my parents. Does that make sense? You know, because your parents are always like, you don't always listen to your parents, but to also like have, you know, a professor be like, no, like, you know, it's also nice to hear that from not just your parents.
Yeah.
You know, I remember going at BYU, like I would straighten my hair, and like before this, I was.
What's that process like? Is it?
Yeah,
like Malcolm X talks about it. They call it conking. Is that a word you've heard of before?
No, actually.
Okay.
But relaxers, like, so like I would get my hair straightened like all the time to try so hard. Because like we said earlier, kids would like touch my hair and just, you know, just all these things. It was really frustrating. And so I just, again, trying so hard to be like everyone else.
Straighten your hair.
Straighten my hair. And then after that, and that's after that, and actually a couple of years later, I actually cut all my hair off and went natural and was really trying hard to embrace me and who I was embrace everything about me, learning to love me and me as a Black woman. What
does cutting your hair off as a Black woman mean culturally?
That I am, you know, okay, I don't want to swear.
You can swear.
No, that's another thing that I still.
You can swear.
I wish I could. You know, can I tell you this? I really want to swear, but that is one thing that I still struggle with allowing myself to swear.
Me too. I don't like to swear.
So,
but I'm just.
I want to swear, okay. But in my head I'm swearing. But it was kind of like the, you know. No, F you.
F you.
F you. Like, I'm going to be Black.
Because what does it mean? What does it mean in a white context to have long hair versus short hair?
Yeah.
And then what does it mean?
Beauty.
What?
Beauty.
You're beautiful.
You're beautiful. And so for the longest time, I could never grow my hair because I was abusing my hair. I was trying so hard to make it straight, to make it long, look like all the other girls so that I could be, you know, beautiful.
Because in white culture, long hair is beautiful.
Yeah, I can't tell you how many people, when I did wear my afro, and they'd be like, "Oh, it's so pretty. When are you gonna braid it?" You know, I'm like, do you know that that braids aren't actually my real hair? These are extensions, and I like, it's a protective style. It is great, but like people would say things like that.
What do you mean protective style?
So like, well, here's a little Black Hair 101.
Please.
So Utah's really dry here, and so our hair never gets oily. So we need to put oil and moisture into our hair. And so by having it in braids, it locks the moisture in to allow the hair to continue to thrive, if that makes sense. Because if it gets too dry, it breaks off. So me not being able to grow my hair, it was basically breaking off and not growing. And so that's why braids are a thing. But at the same time, braids can also be, like, I also would wear braids because it provided me length. It was a way that I could also kind of, you know, be viewed as beautiful, you know.
But it's not your real hair.
No, they're extensions, but it's a Black cultural thing. It's also really great thing that we get to do, but it's also something that protects our hair. It's a protective style.
Got it.
Keep our hair. So yeah.
Okay. So to cut your hair is an FU in the sense of what?
That I love I'm worth it. You know, I just had a memory. Before I even go there, I remember, and this was also, actually, I'll talk about that after. But yeah, it was like, no, I'm gonna embrace me, and I am beautiful, and like my culture, everything that has to do with Black, you know, I was learning to embrace it and not try to shy away because I was trying so hard to just fit in, so hard.
And so when you cut your hair to be short, what was the response? And it doesn't need to be bad.
No. Do you mind if we'll get there in just a minute?
We'll get there. Okay.
But you're asking me a question because I wanted to talk more before we talked about, you were just saying,
we were talking about self-loathing. We were talking about civil rights movement.
Oh, yeah.
We were talking about empowerment.
So, the empowerment. So before that, I actually was on the BYU. I got into the leadership, and I was on the BYU student council. And
is that kind of prestigious?
Yeah, it was prestigious. But I just, at that moment, I just felt like, okay, I want to do some change here. You know, like, it was kind of my personality. I just wanted to do something. And so we created this group called Byu Unity. Well, it was already kind of there, but I kind of took it on. And it was a group where people who are not Mormon or just people who are different, it was a group for people who are different to come together, and we can understand that we're all similar. So like we created that with people who like there was groups. So we would get together with all the non-Mormons, people who had, some disabilities, and we would all get together. And so we can recognize that we are all human beings, because, sometimes people try to separate and be like, no, we're all the same. Like, it was like, yes, we have differences, but at the same time, like we both bleed and that we can relate on some things. And I would go to a lot of events where I learned about Muslims and, recognize like what, because there was this idea in 9/11, all the things that was going on, and people didn't understand different people. And it was really great that we had this ability for people could recognize, oh, you're a human being too, And so like I created, I had that group, and that was really helpful for me. And it was just kind of like, I felt like that was when I was starting to come on my own and, start to embrace my differences when I was seeing other people embracing their differences, and, and that was the start of that. And then, and I actually didn't necessarily shave my head until I left BYU. But I remember when I was wearing my natural hair, because I didn't quite shave it yet, but I remember one time, because I got endowed pretty early before I was married.
Oh.
Yeah, so that's another story. Yeah, I got endowed because I was trying to be good. And I remember one day when okay, so sorry, I'm like all over, my brain is like all over the place. Good. There's a lot. So when I went on that civil rights trip, one of the men who was a part of it, he happened to be my stake president, and he was kind of preparing me to go to the temple. And what he said is, before you go in the temple, it's like this. It's like going to a different culture. And I could totally relate to that. It might seem weird at first, but then over time, you get used to it. And so I think because he gave me
that's your whole life.
Yeah, that's my whole life. So when he explained that to me, like, oh, and so I went to the temple, I was like, oh yeah.
That's weird, like every other thing.
Yeah. Like, like when I see like, it's like the similar when, I see a white person crimping their hair. I think it's interesting and different. It's like the same. I can relate that to going to the temple, it's different. And that's how I embraced it. And so, yeah. That was my experience there. And then one day, though, I went to the temple with an afro. And that's when I realized, oh, this is different. That's the first time I realized what was going on here. Because people were looking at me really weird. It was interesting. Like when I was embracing myself and I go in the temple, and the temple workers like come in, they just were staring at me. Not in like it was, I don't know, it wasn't very kind. I don't know. It was like, you don't belong here. That's kind of how I felt.
So you had not been wearing an afro prior?
No.
Your hair had always been...
Yeah, before I cut it, I started to wear my natural curls. And I went to the temple, did a session, and it was the first time I realized, because I wasn't assimilating, and I was starting to embrace my curls and everything. When I was starting to do that, I started to recognize that people were treating me differently because I wasn't being like them.
Interesting. So what was that like to, you step out of line just a little bit?
I think my eyes were starting to open a little bit. And I was like, oh, I'm not safe here. This is a temple. And that's the first time I felt I wasn't safe. And so, yeah.
What was that like?
Starting to realize that this isn't so perfect. This is a temple, but this isn't really a perfect place. Thinking that this is a place where I could be safe. If I can't even be safe here, that was the first time I was just like, things were coming on my shelf. I was starting to like, okay. Like, obviously, like,
Are you starting to feel emotional right now? A little bit?
No.
Okay.
Not yet. Maybe a little angry.
Angry. Okay.
Yeah, maybe a little angry. But yeah, it was the first thing that things were, because like I did have things on my shelf when I was learning about, the curse of Cain. But again, I was able to explain away that. So that's why they kind of like, but that was the first time I was like, oh.
You're like, a temple's too holy to have any of that nonsense going on.
Yeah, exactly.
And all of a sudden, just because I wear my hair differently, I'm starting to get treated differently.
Yeah. So I leave BYU and I'm not married, which is funny because I'm young, but you know how it is in BYU. Is it okay if I transition out of BYU?
Yeah, this is your story.
Okay,
man.
so I got my degree, art and art education, and I taught at Heritage, a treatment school for troubled youth. And that's actually where my mom was a therapist there. So my mom's a therapist. And that's where I met my husband.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. And working there is also kind of helped me too, because a lot of these kids they had a lot of behavioral issues. And I absolutely loved them, but yet they were seen as the bad kids. You know, they were like, even when you think of church, like they were the kids that were, you know, but then I recognized as I was working with them how beautiful and how good they were. And I think that was another thing that was starting to put things on my shelf as I was experiencing people who, like, these kids were just like, they're like, yeah, I had some crazy moments where like a kid, you know, pushed a door in my back and a girl stapled her stomach in classroom. But besides things like that, I was starting to see like, these kids are beautiful. Like, these kids are amazing. They've done things. They're like, wow, you know, or they've had things happen to them. Not all of them were there because they, you know, that they, you know, were rebelling. It was mostly the parents that I recognized were the ones that needed to be there.
And that was a wow for you. Why?
Because I was starting to just, you know, the idea of, you know, goodly parents and, you know, some of these kids didn't have goodly parents, you know, and, you know, Nephi, I was born of goodly parents. And I don't know. There's just some things that were just, you know.
So you're realizing that the church can condemn individual behavior, but it's not always the kid's fault.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that sometimes people are in bad systems.
Yeah. Yeah. People could be in bad systems and they end up robbing a store, and then, you know, maybe they even went to church for a little bit, but that doesn't mean they're going to hell. I didn't believe that.
Got it. So all of a sudden, people that maybe the church culture were flagging as bad or broken, you're seeing the humanity in them.
Yeah, I'm like, they're not going to hell.
But then this idea of a celestial kingdom, and it's starting to break down for you, and the whole judgment system of individual worth, you're starting to question.
Yeah, because I'm like, what if that person was born in a family who had enough money to provide for them, who had a mother who loved them? What would have happened if they had a child? I'm thinking of like nature versus nurture, you know, like thinking about that. And it's like, okay, so if someone does that and then they do all these things, are they, you know? But then again, though, when I was studying the scriptures, I still had an explanation for that. So even though I was putting it on my shelf, I was like, oh, God would never do that because he looks on the heart, you know? Yeah. So, but yeah, that was kind of the start of that.
Yeah, and I posted about this on Facebook just the other day. One of the biggest problems with Mormon doctrine has nothing to do with polygamy or peepstones or whatever, Book of Mormon historicity. It's just how exclusive the plan of salvation ends up being, how few people are going to make it to the highest degree of the celestial kingdom for whatever reason. You know, the whole narrow is the gate kind of thing. Yeah. That, you know, if you realize how much of a failure God is, if the few people that we know of are actually going to make it, it starts you questioning, how can God be all powerful and all loving?
Yeah, and all loving.
And so many people don't make it for no fault of their own.
Yes. Yeah.
Right?
Because a lot of these kids are trying to commit suicide.
Yeah.
And suicide.
Oh yeah, that's
yeah.
Yeah.
Some of and unfortunately some kids have succeeded, but a lot of them have tried.
Yeah. So you're just kind of getting sensitized to the complexities of the world.
Yeah.
And it makes you wonder whether the gospel, the perfect gospel that you had grown up with, is all that perfect, right?
Yeah. And then again, I have an explanation for that, like I would try and like find a way to like explain it away.
Yeah.
But yeah, and then I met my husband and he wasn't necessarily like BYU, like, he went to UVU.
Oh, oops.
But I think I was drawn to that because he was genuine. And I'm not saying that people at BYU are not genuine and are not honest. No. But him per se.
Because I went to BYU.
Yeah. And I went to BYU. But he was a very honest person. I could tell he was good. Mm-hmm. I could tell he was good.
Now, what about the marrying a white guy thing? Like, I can see from the church angle, there's still that legacy of no interracial marriage. Yeah. And then from the black community, I'm just guessing, but there might be this thing about you're selling out, you're not honoring your people.
Yeah, there were. I had some of that more like with some, maybe some peers. But
I mean, I guess at BYU you wouldn't have that.
Not really. And my family was they still are very inclusive. Like
your family didn't care.
No, my mom has been remarried. She's been remarried a couple times, and one of the marriages was to a white man. Mm-hmm. And my dad remarried a white woman at one point, and
a white woman.
Yeah, and
okay. Okay, so you have a very multicultural.
Yeah,
family.
we embrace it.
Okay.
Okay. We don't care.
So you weren't like, did you always? I mean, you grew up in a white community.
Yeah, I did.
So all the men you would have been exposed to would have been white.
Yeah.
So in your mind, were you pretty much always expecting to marry a white guy?
I kind of just assumed just because, but I've dated Asian. Like I would always joke with my friends that I was interested in the rainbow. Like I liked anybody.
Okay.
It didn't matter. It was more about the person to me. I think if anything, it was more that if they could relate to me on a personal level.
Yeah.
Like even if even dating a black guy, if they were born or have lived in an area where there was more predominantly white people that I could relate. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Then that was what I was drawn to, I think, in a way, because I was rejected kind of when I went to Georgia. And I think, that was kind of where some of that was, because I tried a little bit in Georgia, but I just kept getting like, oh, you're not one of us,
Yeah.
So,
okay.
Yeah. So yeah, I met my husband and he's from Woodland Hills. And his family, there's no brownness in their family.
So how was that for them?
It was a shocker.
For them?
Oh yeah.
You're married you're dating a black girl.
Yeah, they were shocked. Mm-hmm. But then again, I mean, like I said when I was telling you about when I would be like wave at people and get people to love me, it was always a challenge. Like it was kind of a challenge to me to like, I'm going to show you. You're going to love me. That's kind of like, but actually they do. So, so yeah. But yeah, I met my husband and he wasn't necessarily priesthood in the church stance. He's a really amazing person, but like in the church stance, he wasn't necessarily like Peter priesthood. Mm-hmm. But I was drawn to that for some reason, which I'm grateful actually now looking back. But yeah.
Excellent. Oh, had he served a mission?
Yeah, he served a mission. Okay. He served in California.
So he was edgy in some way.
Yeah, he was edgy in some way.
Like coffee, like
no,
edgy?
No,
not that edgy.
No, not that edgy.
Okay. I'm trying
now
to get
that you say that, I'm like, oh wait.
So like he had facial hair. You mean?
No, he just was.
I'm not asking. I'm not trying to dig. I'm just trying to.
Oh yeah, he did have facial hair. He actually had his beard was like down to here,
which is kind of edgy.
It was like 4 inches.
It's kind of edgy.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
He was artistic.
Yeah.
In whatever ways he didn't always fit the.
Yeah, except he didn't fit the mold, and like I was drawn to that.
But still faithful.
Yeah, still faithful.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, like, I mean, I remember maybe not to my like standard at one point because like we would go in church and he wouldn't sometimes sing the hymns and I'd be like, you need to sing the hymns, so like maybe in my mind, but yeah, he was pretty. Yeah. So, yeah.
So you married him?
Yeah, we married. We didn't marry in the temple though.
Okay.
Yeah. There's
all sorts of public suspicion and shame around that.
Yeah.
Was it hard or?
Not really. Like, again, my family.
But you were the Molly Mormon, so that, I imagine, was that a disappointment for you or something you had
Well, I did want it in the future, but at the same time, I recognize that he was such a good person, regardless of some, like, regardless of, like, I recognize that we were, like, going through, like, how do I say this? I recognize that there might be some struggles, but I've gone through struggles at one point. It was just so happens there were some struggles while we were getting married, if that makes sense. And I recognize that. And I wanted one day to be married in the temple, and it was disappointing, but it wasn't that big of a deal because if I was married in the temple, my family couldn't come. And so I wanted my family to be there.
That was a bonus.
Yeah. So yeah.
But in this culture, everyone assumes you didn't get married in the temple. You must have had premarital sex.
Yeah. We didn't, but...
Oh, you didn't?
No.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So that must suck. And I wasn't trying to pry, but...
No, but I mean, I'll be open. We
that
didn't.
must suck because that's what everyone thought.
Yeah. But we didn't.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, again, it's like... What was frustrating, it's like it's dependent on what bishop you have.
The roulette.
Yeah. Because we were going to be married in the temple, actually, and then the bishop was like, not ready. So on the invitations, it was like, oh, you're going to be married in this temple. And then a week after, it was like, nope. So, yeah.
Okay.
Or not a week. Well, so we were already planning on having like a ring ceremony and then getting married in the temple. And so we just
if you come from a part member family, you're going to be relieved in many ways.
Yeah, I was relieved.
What a freaking stress to have to exclude your dad.
Yeah, exactly.
And a bunch of brothers or whoever.
Yeah.
From, like, I can see why it wasn't some necessarily awfully traumatic thing.
Yeah, I think on his end, they were disappointed.
Oh, yeah.
But,
it's like person of color and not temple.
Yeah.
Like,
I mean, yeah.
I'm not saying that for them it was a disappointment.
Yeah, but yeah, and culturally and,
it's different.
like what we said about religion, it's different.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
And even if a white family isn't explicitly thinking, she's a person of color, she's lesser than, we all have those associations. It's like something that blew my mind, this implicit emotion when they put white dolls and black dolls in front of little black girls.
Yeah.
Even the little black girls would pick the white dolls.
Yeah.
And they'd ask the black girls, why did you pick the white dolls? Well, the black dolls are bad, or the black dolls are dirty, or the black. So these implicit associations affect us all. And so even if your husband's family weren't formally disappointed, in their mind, they're dealing with all the baggage of the of those negative associations. We all, because we all do, including people of color. Sorry.
No. And what you just said about the doll is exactly a lot of my experience growing up. So yes.
Feeling that
the idea of like the bad. And then it's like, it's bigger than just the church,
Yeah. It's culture.
Yeah.